Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is MyPreppyDiaries. I hope you guys can hear me very well. So this is part 2 of this series, which I still don't know what I'm naming at this point. I have ideas, but nothing's really actually sticking to me. So I'm hoping that whatever I've put up is okay. I also want to say that I am trying to compress this as much as I can because I feel like everyone should read the book. I think you'd learn a lot more from the book than you are learning from me, because there are certain things that I haven't mentioned that she's already mentioned in the book. But yeah, that's all I want to say on that. And also I just want to also preface what my position is. So as we're talking about, complementarianism and the woman's role and male headship. So unlike the author, I still do believe that men, specifically your husband, does have spiritual leadership within the home, but not in the way that it's been illustrated throughout modern Christianity, in a way that I feel like is unlike what we're seeing in Ephesians 5, which paints this beautiful picture of mutual submission, two people becoming one flesh. There is no domineering attitude from the men coming towards the woman. It is equal. Like the man is cherishing the woman as the woman is cherishing the church. Because at the end of the day, your principal husband is Jesus Christ. So whatever he says goes. It don't matter what the man says. If Jesus says yes and your husband says no, who are you going to listen to? It's Jesus. So that is my position, which is again quite close to hers too, except for the fact that she just doesn't believe in male spiritual leadership. I believe it when it's done in the way that it's been addressed in Ephesians 5, which is mutual submission. No domineering of one person over the other. I don't believe in that. So yeah, that's what I want to say. I also want to kind of tread back on our previous conversation in part 1 when we're talking about the patriarchy and how it exists within biblical text, which is again unsurprising because the Bible was written in a patriarchal system. But then again, we see in Galatians, I think chapter 3 verse 26 to 28, where there is this heavy emphasis of there not being this sort of exclusivity or favoritism towards one group over the other, that there is this unification that even Jesus addressed in it before his last breath on the cross. And so I feel like that is what sets Christianity apart, because man and woman, we can both be truly liberated through Christ, and there's just no one over the other. There's not this social hierarchy in heaven. It doesn't exist, because that was never God's intention. And so yes, going back to what I said, although yes, the patriarchy is seen within biblical history, it still doesn't make it Christian. I think that's the part that I want to emphasize too. It just shows us the history and the human root of biblical womanhood. So that's what I wanted to address. What was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh yes, so our next topic is why do some women hate Paul? So in her book, she often talks about her conversations that she has with her students, many of them being women, and how they sort of had issues with reading certain passages. And I'll give you an example of what that might be. So 1 Corinthians 14, Ephesians 5, 1 Timothy 2, Titus 2, 1 Corinthians 11, and Colossians 3, and lastly 1 Peter 3. And much like the other women who sort of I wrestled with these verses, it was more so because I felt like when I initially read them that they were perpetuating this idea that a woman's role is to be capped, and I am against that idea because I feel like it contradicts what I've also seen throughout scripture, especially in the New Testament, because God made us equal. we are made in his image and we are called to be like Jesus. How can we be called to be like Jesus, go into greater horizons and do bigger things, if now my role is limited because I am simply a woman? It doesn't make sense. So she also goes on to kind of expand on this when she talks about how the evangelical church has basically had a fear of recognizing women in leadership roles, because it would feel like we were bowing down to a societal pressure. But what if that wasn't the case? And like the author suggests, that actually, what about if we actually misinterpreted what Paul said, and the subsequent exclusion of women in leadership roles, to affirm the attitudes and the patterns of the world around us. And so when I read that, I started thinking about Romans 12:2, which is, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test what is the good and what is the good, perfect will of God. I think that's it, but I'll put it up in case I got it wrong. What is his good, pleasing, perfect will? I think that was the end of it. So that's actually like one of my favorite verses. And when I was instantly reminded of that after I read that part of the book, and it was because I was like, because I was like, when we adopt a new identity or a new way of thinking, we are now operating from that system. So how are we now being able to discern that what we are saying or how we are thinking is coming from sound doctrine? And this also made me think that Romans 12:2 wasn't just a reminder, it was a warning of the upcoming indoctrination like we're seeing today. Yes, so in her book, the author argues that Paul has been used as a foundational ground of understanding biblical gender roles which oppress women. She even goes on to further to cite a woman called, I think she's a scholar too, called Beverly Roberts Gavanta, who actually appeals that evangelicals have turned Paul into a weapon for culture wars. And she even says, and I quote, "We have reduced his call for oneness into patrolling borders for uniformity. We have traded the radical character of Christ's body for a rigid hierarchy of gender and power." Did she lie? That's how I felt when I read it. I was like, yes, because she was right. She was right. Anyway, I want to go on to another subject where we'll be heading on to the topic of marriage. So the author's favorite marriage sermon is from a medieval priest called John Merck, who lived through the late 14th century to the early 15th century. And he had a collection of sermons called Festial, which was popularized amongst Protestant families. And so this is how he describes marriage between a husband and wife. So he says that, "Thus, by God's command, a man shall take on a wife of age, not underage, like condition and like birth. For this a man shall leave father, mother, and draw her to be a part of himself, and she shall love him, and he her, truly together, and they shall be two in one flesh." So obviously through this we see that there's this beautiful illustration of mutual affection, mutual submission, not this gender hierarchy that evangelicals like to, push a narrative for. He even talks about what happens when a priest blesses a woman's ring. He says it represents God who neither ends or begins, and when it's put on her finger that has a vein running to her heart, showcasing that she will love God over all things, then her husband. So this ring plays a heavy emphasis on her allegiance to God before her husband. He also quotes liberally from Genesis 1-3, Matthew 22, and John 2. So he doesn't quote Paul at all, and I have reason to believe that this might have been intentional just because of what we're currently seeing today and what we have been seeing throughout modern Christianity and how a woman's role is placed. So he doesn't at all place a lot of stress. He places little stress on female subjugation on the basis of living well and in marriage. He also doesn't declare that a woman should obey her husband. Actually, he places more emphasis on themes surrounding a woman placing her allegiance to God, because I think he said that what got Eve into trouble was loving her husband too much. So the ring is a reminder to put God first above everything else, and then their submission to their husband. This next topic is the household codes. So the following passages I will read were passages that were famously used to dominate discussions regarding gender roles. So a call to women to graciously submit authority to their husbands. Those verses are Ephesians 5:21 to 21 and chapter 6 verse 9, Colossians chapter 3:18, also for chapter 4 verse 1, and 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 18, and then chapter 3 and 7, I think, and then Titus 2 chapter 1 to 10. In her book, she also mentions New Testament scholars called Caroline Osiek and Margaret MacDonald, I hope I'm not pronouncing their names wrong, who argue that the Christian household codes were actually oppositional and not accommodating to the Greco-Roman world. They continuously argue against the idea that these household codes were used to subjugate women under male authority. They also say that Paul wasn't imposing Roman patriarchy onto Christians. What he did instead was showcasing how the gospel sets us free. And so they're stating that in first century Christianity, that what they heard when they interpreted the following verses, Ephesians 5:21 to 22, verse 25, 28, and 35, as well as, did I say that properly? And Colossians 3:18 to 19, that the first Christians who read these verses, they did not see it with a lens of masculine authority, and I feel like we see this even in Ephesians 21 to 22, because it is the start of the household codes, and even later on in 31-32, where we are still seeing this heavy emphasis on both husband and wife submitting to each other. There is mutual submission to one another. So their argument is that Ephesians 5 actually should be used and read as an oppositional narrative to the Roman patriarchy, not something that accommodates it. Okay, so the contrast between the Roman household codes and the early church movement. So the Roman society heavily depended upon the patriarchy to maintain order. So they placed much authority to men to be the male head over women, children, and slaves, to make sure that their power was ensured and concentrated in men. However, because of the early church, it disrupted a lot of their social expectations, as we saw women actively being participants in the ministry of Jesus, as they were praying, they were professing, they hosted churches, they were learning alongside men, and they were what else? They were doing they had many roles. They were recognized as leaders and disciples, and this is why it was important to the epistles in Galatians chapter 3 verse 28, and I feel like this is very foundational to this discussion, because this is what it says. It says that there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. This verse does not eradicate human differences. Actually, I feel like it redefines the value and our spiritual standing, as Paul is challenging the idea that because of our social class or gender or ethnicity, he's challenging that those things do not now permit or negate someone from having closeness to Jesus or having value. And I feel like this discussion is very important because there is someone in my life who unfortunately on multiple occasions gave that power to someone else. They felt like because they were in this particular status that they would then that they would then, like, their prayers would be more weighty or they would be more powerful. They're negating that the Holy Spirit is dwelling in them. I say this all the time to every single one of my siblings and even my friends. The same resurrecting power that is in Jesus Christ is in us all. We always talk about having a mustard seed of faith and you'll be able to move mountains. Why do we not believe this? Why are we placing so much superiority on men? It's typically men, and it's annoying to me because we have power, we have dominion, we have authority, and I really wish that a lot of women would see that for themselves and not be dependent on someone else to do that for them, but to know that it is Jesus, it is Jesus's blood, it is Jesus's love for all of us that brings union, that brings power, that makes the enemies tremble. Like, I don't know, it just, like, whenever I think about this person, and like it just irritates me how they've always allowed this other person in their life, their proximity and their status, to kind of undermine their own relationship that they have with Jesus, because they think that they're less than, and it's really sad. But yeah, so I believe that the resistance to women having freedom, leadership, any form of power or authority comes from an ingrained unconscious bias. I believe this is so because we see throughout history how the patriarchy has been deeply embedded throughout history and across culture. And so because men are given power, or granted power and authority that women are denied, oftentimes it is very difficult and hard for them, to a group who benefits from so much, to see the injustices that women often face on a daily basis, even within the church. So I clearly see a lot of these same aspects even in my own community. As I've mentioned before, I am Congolese, and there is a common phrase that we say in our country, in our community, and it's called Kanga Motema, which basically means like be patient, hold it in your heart. And so it's basically to showcase someone with resilience. So it might sound nice on the surface, but oftentimes this phrase is frequently directed towards women in situations that are surrounding infidelity, that is surrounding emotional suffering and abuse, and there's nothing nice about that word when it's directed towards a woman. And so, and whenever I hear the word, I just think hold it in, or keep this in for the sake of the relationship. Like, again, nothing that brings me self-esteem or joy. I feel like, again, it's a word used to confine women, to not allow them to be brave and bold and step out of toxic conversations. And it's annoying because rarely would you ever see, especially in our community, where men would have to show the same level of tolerance towards a woman when he's now when she's now giving him disrespect and dishonoring her. So yeah, I really don't appreciate that, and I believe that. So I don't know where I dropped off from, but I just wanted to kind of go back to what I was saying before. So my issue is with phrases like such is that it's the imbalance. It's the fact that it's conditioning this normalcy for women specifically to be in pain and to sacrifice, while protecting the men from protecting male behavior from accountability. And it also suggests that a woman's value is tied to how much she can endure suffering from a man and not her own dignity or humanity. And I was just thinking, like, when I hear phrases like this, I recoil. Like, it makes me sick to my stomach. But to a man, they would never ever recoil the same way that I would, because again, they benefit from such a system, which is why the patriarchy is such an issue, because it's so hard to dismantle when it's embedded in institutions, it's embedded in social expectations, it's embedded in language, it's embedded in everyday casual cultural attitudes. And so that was like essentially what I was saying earlier before I got cut off, because it was just like, sorry, it was annoying me, because I was just like, what the heck is this? You know, and I'm seeing it within my own culture. I've witnessed it, which is why I've always said I'm against it. And it's hard as a Congolese woman coming from, you know, African societies, cultures where we've adopted these narratives that only further press into the oppression of women. It doesn't uplift women, which is why whenever sometimes I would speak to guys and they were just like, oh, like, would you ever date someone from your culture? I'll be like, no, absolutely not. You know, and it's because of phrases like this. They believe in this, they benefit from a system, they're not unattached to it. They don't understand the injustices of a woman because they're not, then they don't experience it at all. They experience the benefits of phrases like ganga mutema. You know, and I've seen it multiple times where I've gone to church, or back then when I used to go to Congolese churches, or when I was like more so into the Congolese community when I was younger, and I would hear women tell other women like their husband has cheated on them, and they're just like, "Kanga mutema," just hold it in, like, it's okay, it's okay. I'm like, no, there's nothing okay. Get out. Don't stay for a man who will leave you with nothing to show for. Like, depend on Jesus, that's all you need. But yeah, that was basically the end of what I wanted to say. This is probably a lot more shorter than the videos that I made, the video I made previously, but I hope you did enjoy this part 2, where I also give an insight to my culture and how it also adopts the traits of the patriarchy and complementarianism. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say for this video. And yeah, I hope that you'll be interested in part 2, because I will be talking about translations. I will be talking about Paul's usage of maternal imagery, the disdain that comes, the disdain of the women's bodies, and other topics that she's also brought up in her book, because everything I'm talking about has already been addressed in her book. I'm just speaking about it because I feel like it's very important and it's interesting. And I feel like all of us can learn from it. And like I said in my previous video, again, I feel like men need to read this so that you can clock your unconscious bias towards women. If you ever felt like hearing what I've got to say and it made you feel disturbed in your spirit or something, I think you should look into that. Like, you seriously should. Women also, because I want to also speak about how women have also created and allowed a space for other women to be oppressed. But I feel like I'll talk about that a bit more further in the videos that have yet to come. So that's about it. I really hope you enjoyed it. And this is the end of part 2 of this series. So please comment, like, share, and subscribe. And I can't wait to hear other people's opinions and thoughts about this, because this whole discussion is so interesting to me. Yeah, so goodbye guys. Thank you for watching, and yeah, I'll see you guys later.